my camera just gave me the scare of a lifetime. It wasn't turning on no matter what I did. But evidently, I think you're okay now. Hello, my name's Jade, and today I'm going to be going through my top 10 favourite book series. I sat down last night and I wrote a list of all the series I've ever finished and all the series that I'm in the middle of. Some things were apparent and made compiling this list very difficult. A lot of the series I finished were series that I read between the years of 2013, we'll say, and 2017 predominantly. A lot of YA series that I read when I was younger. Not all, there are some YA series that I read within recent-ish years. So that created compiling this list very difficult because a lot of them I just can't remember. I don't know, I'd have to reread them. So I've gone mostly off of memory / if I were to reread it, where I think it would land. I do have a couple of honourable mentions before we get started. The first of which is the Infernal Devices, which I fully just chucked. Funnily enough, I really didn't like Clockwork Angel back when I read it, but I adored the second two books in this series, and whenever I think of the lead three characters, it hits me right in my gut every time. This love triangle was the love triangle of all, nothing will ever compare. There have been things since it that have been similar, but nothing's compared. I'm tearing up just thinking about it. This is also the only Cassandra Clare series 2 feature on this list. I haven't read The Dark Artifices and I haven't read The Last Hours, and I've been tempted, and I own The Dark Artifices and I just haven't been able to bring myself to read them yet. They feel very much stuck in the past for me, even though people still actively love those books. But I adored this series. Like I said, I loved the last two books. I have both of them 9s out of 10s. I still feel things when I think about it, and to me that is a good sign. The second honourable mention might be a little bit more divisive, if that wasn't already divisive, my lack of reading Cassandra Clare, and that is the ACOTAR series by Sarah J. Maas. I love the characters in this series so dearly. I think I might even love them more than I love any of the characters in any of her series, maybe, but I don't love the plot. I don't love the balance between the relationships and the drama and the kind of internal struggle versus the fantasy plot. I feel like we spend so much time with the drama and the relationship struggles that plot suffers a little bit. It just didn't feel as strong. I wasn't as invested in the stuff that was happening in the series as I was in her other two series. I did still really enjoy these books. I had fun reading all of them. I do still like the world. I think there's interesting stuff happening here. Like I said, I'm obsessed with the characters. And so really, maybe it is one of my top 10 favourite series, and it should be on the top 10 list. I don't know. I really don't know where to put it. So I'm putting it in my honourable mentions for now. Okay, and now we're on to the official top 10. Number 10, I completely forgot at first. It wasn't on the list at all. And then I realised, I was like, that needs to be on the list. And that is The Twilight Saga by Stephanie Meyer. I can't believe Twilight nearly didn't make the list. Sacrilege. It's funny because I read the books after I watched the films, but I still really loved them. I still really enjoyed them. I think on the whole I definitely preferred the books to the films as well. Nothing makes me nostalgic in the way that Twilight, nothing compares. It was such an intense feeling. The love for these books and the feeling that these books and films evoked. It's funny because when I think about Twilight, though, I don't think about the books, I think about the films. And I've rewatched the films. I've never reread the books. Another reason why I initially almost completely forgot about Twilight is because it was on my unfinished series list, because I haven't read Midnight Sun. I own it. I pre-ordered it, but I just haven't been able to bring myself to do it, and I don't know. I think it's because it's so long. I don't know. And I love that she eventually put it out. I also never finished The Host by Stephanie Meyer, which I've heard nothing but glorious things about. People that I really trust, and people to this day still say that it was a phenomenal book. I still own it, so maybe I will read that puppy one day. Anyway, Twilight has to be on my top 10 favourite list. It has to be. It's it's an internal part of me. But I didn't really know how strongly I felt about it overall. I didn't know where to put it, so it's at number 10. But it has to be on the list. The girlies that get it, and the girlies that don't. It is what it is. Speaking of books that really introduced me to YA and really kind of ignited my love of reading in a way I hadn't quite read before comes The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. That was a really weird way of reading it. I think The Hunger Games might be the first YA book I ever read. Up until that, I'd only read children's. And I kind of liked reading, but I don't think I read as obsessively as I did until like this kind of, I don't know if it's necessarily The Hunger Games per se, but this time of reading is when I really became obsessed. I watched the first movie and I remember thinking it was really weird, but really intrigued. I remember watching the trailer and then thinking like, yeah, that looks weird but interesting, and then my dad took me to watch it just on a whim. I'm like, yeah, this is weird but interesting. And then I got the box set of books, I think for my birthday or something, and I read all of them and I loved them. I thought they were so good. I loved Catching Fire especially. I just became really attached to this series in a very similar way to the way I became attached to Twilight, but because I'd read the books before I watched the films this time around, at least for the most part, this was like the first time I could really commit to a fandom in that way, and was really obsessive over watching the trailers and getting the merch and seeing the castings and all of that stuff. It was very important in my teenage fandom journey. I also just think these books should be classics. I fully believe like we should be teaching the Hunger Games in school. I think they add to our whole dystopian canon in a really nuanced, interesting way. I haven't read them since, which is probably one of the reasons why they're lower down. If I reread them, there's a good chance I would end up putting them higher up. The only thing that I can't really remember is like the quality of the writing. I also have read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes though, by Suzanne Collins. I pre-ordered that one and I read it as soon as it came out. Obviously that one made the cut. To be fair, I found this Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes fascinating. I thought it was so well written. Themes and the ideas were so subtle and they just were woven in really well, and they were really contradictory at times and really complicated. So if that speaks for anything, like The Hunger Games probably does hold up. This next one I moved around I think the most of any of the books on this list. I really didn't know where to put it. I feel really conflicted. But number 8 we have the Mara Dyer trilogy by Michelle Hodgkin. Now the thing is, this is one of the more recent series that I've read on this list. I read them in 2020. I marathoned all 3 of them. I was obsessed. I could not get enough. And then I read the first 2 books in the Shul Confessions shortly thereafter, although we all know what's going on there. I think about this trilogy on a monthly basis at the least. Like I think about it all the time. I love these characters and they just kind of like haunt me. I loved the ambiguity of this trilogy of not really knowing what was going on, and it takes a while to really kind of figure out, and then even when you know what's going on, like you have the Shul Confessions and it becomes abundantly clear that you still don't really know what's going on. And I loved that. I loved the mystery, I loved the intrigue, I loved the relationships between the characters, and the characters in general were just really fun. I was flicking through them actually recently because every now and then like I'll go on a deep dive where it's all I can think about, and that had happened. And I was flicking through and I forgot like how funny as well, like how snarky Mara is as a character. I feel like I misremember Mara a lot. Like in my mind she's very serious and like melodramatic, when in reality she was really smart and quirky and fun. I think that might be the Shul Confessions. I think that might be like what happened there, reading her from Noah's perspective. Anyway, so originally this was lower down because I'm like, yeah, but like, is it Twilight? Is it The Hunger Games though? Like, surely those should come above the Mara Dyer trilogy. I have so much more sentimental attachment to both of those than I do this one. But like I said, every now and then it just plagues me and it's all I can think about. And I read this much more recently. So maybe that, to be fair, is part of the reason why I can't stop thinking about it, because we don't have a conclusion. We don't know how it ends. Will we ever know? I don't know. I wouldn't mind waiting like 6 years even, as long as we knew the book will one day come out. Okay, at number 7 we have the Crescent City series by Sarah J. Maas. This is another one that I wasn't really sure where to put it. I felt kind of middling about it though, because there's a lot of disappointment for me in this trilogy, because I really didn't want this specific story arc to be a trilogy. I wanted it to be longer, and I do feel like it was rushed. But I love the characters. I loved this first book so much. I love this world that she's introduced, and I love the writing style for the most part of this book series even. I do think I had some problems with the writing in this series that I didn't with her other series though, which is interesting. And like I said, that disappointment thing, yeah, it's annoying. I think as well, another reason why this one and Axar might be like lower on this than I originally anticipated is because both of them are incomplete. There's still room for them to change and room for them to move higher up on this and to move lower down. So I feel like I just also kind of feel more uncertain about them. I don't know, it's hard. Like, I'm looking at my list and I'm like, maybe it should be higher up, because I did have a lot of fun. There's still loads of strengths. There were so many great moments in this series. There's a lot of things about Sarah's books that I love in this series. But also, like, I'm going off of the memory of a lot of the books that come next. So if I were to reread them, there's every chance that, like, Crescent City is actually stronger than these series is. It's just that I remember them so fondly. House of Sky and Breath and Flame and Shadow really did a number on me. I think I gave Sky and Breath like a 7-ish out of 10, and I give Flame and Shadow like an 8. I just wish it was longer than a trilogy. And then next up we have a very special one at number 6, and that is the Fifth Wave trilogy by Rick Yancey. There was a very long period of time where this was my favourite series. I gave the first book 10 out of 10, I gave the second book an 8 out of 10, and I gave the last book a 9 out of 10. And for me, if I give all of the books 8 or higher, and especially if like one of them's a 9 and one of them's a 10, then that automatically, like, that's telling me things. The reason I bumped it down so far from number 1, in part was because I do have some, like, genuinely I have some new favourite series, but it's just been so long. I've finished this series the longest ago compared to the series that come after this. So it's the one that I'm the most uncertain of, even though there was so long where it was my absolute favourite series. And I have a feeling that if I reread it, I would still love it, because I remember, like, what happened in it pretty well, and it was very fondly. I loved how complicated this series is. There were so many riddles and things we had to figure out about an alien invasion, and so it's one of those that's drenched in what it means to be human. Characters, like, they all felt very human. They felt flawed and complicated, and they were so much fun to hang out with. I think I need to reread it, but I'm so scared. Oh. And then at number 5 we have The Strange the Dreamer duology by Laini Taylor. I read these not last year, the year before, 2022. It feels more recent than that. And my overarching opinion of this duology was that both of them were beautiful. They both had very different feelings to them. Like, I remember thinking that they were strong for very different reasons. But together, as a duology, as like one longer book, oh my god, it was so beautiful, and it was so well constructed. I was not expecting to become as attached to these characters in the space of a duology as it was. Beautiful is like the word that just like keeps chucking itself at me. I don't know if I've ever read something quite as beautiful and like mystical as this duology. There's just something, there's a magical quality about it that I can't put my finger on what it is. I love Laini Taylor. She is one of my other favourite authors. I'm gonna link the video where I talk about the duology below, because my thoughts will be more fresh there. I don't really know what else to tell you, because I was just so impressed by it. I was so in awe after finishing it. I think without a shadow of doubt it is my favourite duology that I've ever read. I loved Laini Taylor's writing and her worlds. There's just something so magical about it that I wish I could convey to you what it is, but I don't know. It very much gives me, like, if Erin Morgenstern wrote YA, I feel like it would be akin to Laini Taylor. Also, this is technically YA, but it doesn't feel... I remember thinking it felt older for a YA, so if you've not read it yet, and that's part of the reason why, maybe don't worry about that. Number 4, we have the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy by Laini Taylor. It was relatively recent. I finished this series, but it was when I was 18. I'm like, oh yeah, I wasn't 18 that long ago. It was 2017. So it's been a while. When I read the last book in this trilogy, I read the first half, put the book down for 6 months, and then finished it. And so I had a really, like, discombobulated experience of reading that last book, and I always kind of regretted it, and I always wish I could reread the trilogy so that I remembered everything clearly, because I do think there were lots of little Easter eggs and little tidbits that add up over time. Again, like the mystery. I mean, the mystery in all of Laini's books. I've only read The Strange the Dreamer duology and the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy. I will admit I know she wrote books before both of these, which I feel like I need to look into because of how much I love Daughter of Smoke and Bone and Strange Dreamer. But they have this, like, almost wispy mystery, like it's smoke and bone, it's like shadow and mirrors. There's just that kind of quality to it. The writing is so stinking beautiful. Characters are so much fun. They're funny and quirky, but they've also got so much feeling. I very much you get the feeling that Laini Taylor is a hopeless romantic reading her books, and I love that. There is almost like this fairy tale-esque quality to them. Didn't know how to place them in terms of Daughter of Smoke and Bone versus Stranger Dreamer, because obviously I finished Stranger Dreamer much more recently, but I do feel like if I were to reread this trilogy, I think I'd still love it, you know. I really am confident. I've just not given myself the time to do it yet. I adored Days of Blood and Starlight. I'm pretty sure I gave it a 10 out of 10. It was one of my absolute favourite books for a really long time. I remember with each book, you'd come the end, you think you'd know what's going on, and then it would just widen out, and then it happened again with the last book, and you're like, well, I thought I knew what was going on, but clearly I didn't. I just have a feeling that this is always going to be one of my absolute favourite series. I own 4 copies of the entire trilogy, and I own 2 copies of both Stranger Dreamer and Reason of Nightmares, and I also own 2 copies of Lips Touch, which is a short story collection by Laini Taylor. Yep. Okay, we're at the top 3. I feel like I'm kind of cheating with my number 3 and 2, but at the same time, I'm not. At number 3, we have Phase 2 of the Skullduggery Pleasant series by Derek Landy. So there are 3 phases of the Skullduggery Pleasant series as of right now. The 3rd phase has just begun. We've just got A Mind Full of Murder. I remember being worried when I started this one that it wouldn't be the same as phase 1. But I've always loved the idea of staying in the same world with the same characters. I remember Cassandra Clare got a lot of stick for doing it back in the day, but I always loved that. And so I loved the fact that we were going to return to these characters. I knew it was going to be very different, and I think that worried me. And it's very different to the original series. They have very different feelings to them. When I read the first 2 books in this series, Resurrection and Midnight, I wasn't obsessed with it. I think I enjoyed Resurrection, but I was it's not quite the same. But also it's the beginning of the series, and the beginning of the series can always be a little bit hard sometimes. It takes a while for you to find its groove. And then Midnight, I remember not loving the end of that one, but then Bedlam was fantastic, and and then Seasons of War was fantastic, and then Dead or Alive was fantastic, and then Until the End was they were so strong to me. They were so epic. He does epic fantasy so well. Stakes and the fights and the tension and don't even get me started on the Skullduggery Pleasant characters. They feel like home to me, and they continue to even in phase 3. And the fact that I get to have that feeling to go back to again and again. I'm so lucky. I love this series. I have so much nostalgia tied into it. I read the original series when I was younger. It was one of the series that really made me fall in love with reading. That I was reading in around that Hunger Games time. I never finished it though. And then a couple years ago I reread them and finished them in order to continue on. And I'm so glad I did. One of the best decisions I've ever made, and I don't say that lightly. Number 2, we have phase 1 of the Skullduggery Pleasant series. Of the 2, the original series, the OG, the place where we all started, I do think is my favourite. It's hard because it's a 9-book series, and I always just think when you have especially an epic fantasy-esque style series, the longer is always going to prevail. And so I love the fact that it's 9 books, and a lot of the books are long, and I love that. Following Valkyrie Kane, who was 12 in the beginning, and she's 18, 19 in the end, so you're really following this big long stretch of time, and she changes so much throughout that period of time. I love Skullduggery as a character. I love our whole main crew. Tanith, China, Ghastly, Fletcher. Oh my god, what they called the zombies. The zombies, Clarabelle. We stick with such a great, and even the bad guys come back again and again. We get attached to them. Video A Sangman was great. Have a different focus in the U series, so a lot of those characters aren't around as much, or they're very different if they are. Understandably, a lot of stuff happened in this series. It's following a different phase of life, and I love that for it. But there is something about this childish, just fun and whimsy. Just one of my absolute most favourite series. I feel like I have 2 absolute most favourite series, and this is one of them. I mean, between this one and the one that's number 1, the only reason this one is number 2 is because I think I'm a little bit more obsessive about the first one. But realistically, this one could very easily be swapped, and I would be perfectly fine with this being my number 1 as well, because if anything, this has been in my life longer, and like I said, it does just feel like home to me. It is my safe space. Maybe it is my number 1. I don't know. This isn't the time to be debating. Honestly, they're equal. They are like for like. Just gonna rate the book some more. And then at number 1, I feel like you probably could have guessed what's coming, but it's Throne of Glass by Sarah J Maas. Like, Sarah J Maas is one of my absolute most favorite authors. I am obsessed with her series. I love the way the story progresses. It's very similar, now that I think about it, to Skullduggery and also Dr. Smoke Moan, in the way that the world just keeps getting bigger and bigger and the problems keep getting bigger and bigger. I love that in a series, evidently, because a lot of the series at the very top do this. Strange the Dreamer does it as well. Like, you think you know what's going on in the first one, and then number 2 just like blows the scale out. Like, you start off thinking this series is going to be about one thing, and by the end of the second book it's clear that actually no, maybe we're going to be following something else. And then like, so the third book you're like, yeah, I think this is going to be following something else. And then in book number 4 it really kicks into gear, and then you get to book 5 and you're like, how did we get, where were we just? I love the characters. I love Aelin with my whole heart. I love Manon with my Dorian. Kale, I love Kale. I always loved Kale. Lysandra, Adion, however you say his name. The 13, my best friend, gave me a shirt that says like, we are the 13 from now until the darkness takes us, and I nearly cried right there. She's not read the series either, so I couldn't really say it out. I was like, just you wait till you've read the series and you realise what you've given me. Characters just, they live rent free in my mind. I'm so attached to all of them. I think they all go through such interesting and complex stories and narratives, and they grow so much, and it was so fun to be on that journey with them. Like, the series is really well paced. Like I said, I love the way it adds over time. There's so many strands of like puzzles and mysteries and riddles that really slowly over time connect. Empire of Storms is my favourite of the series for that reason. I so vividly remember opening with the banging of the bone drums with Elena, and the way everything came together in that one. Oh, it was magical. It's one of my absolute favourite books, Empire of Storms. I didn't love Kingdom of Ash as much, but I do think if I reread it, I would forgive a lot of the problems I originally had with it. And honestly, it's a pretty solid end of this series, but I really hope we get to see these characters again. I feel like we will, you know. I feel like she's gonna bring them back. I feel like she kind of low-key hinted at it in her Today interview, like subtly as she could. I give you this name to use when other names grow too heavy. I just can't. I just love this series. It's just my favourite. This and Skullduggery, they're just my favourite. All the books that I've discussed in this video and previous videos in more detail, I will link the videos to them in the description so you can hear more coherent fresher thoughts on them, if you will. Really love to hear what your favourite series is. And that is all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing morning, afternoon, evening / night. My name's Jade. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye.